All right, so what I did was to go through, most of the rest of what's in this chapter. So what I'm telling you is if what we did does not make sense to you, it would be in your best interest to go back and read the PDF. Yeah, it's a little bit dated, but I don't believe there have been many, if any, changes to the code. All right. They talk about in here what a listener is. I don't want to do that. All right. I don't want to confuse anyone more than I already possibly have. Java, Android, whatever, is another one of these languages that is known as an event listener language. So it is sitting there. It doesn't react until you do something. So in other words, it doesn't react until you click a button or enter something into a text, edit text or whatever. And that's what they're saying here. So these listeners basically are where you put the code when you want something to happen. So they show it right there, import the listener, implement the listener, etc. So all this stuff is shown in here. All right? We went over all of that stuff. If you look up on the screen, please, they mention this IME thing. This was right at the end. IME is an acronym that stands for Input Method Editor. And I think they even show over here, those we put in the done and we put in the unspecified, if you look up on the screen. We had this in our code. We said if that is done, meaning you want to close the soft keyboard, or if it's unspecified. It says if you're using an older device that has an enter key on it. All right? I don't know if there, many of those even exist anymore. I don't know. Now, I want to make sure you get this. This is page 118 of this PDF. How to get and set the text for widgets. All right? Get means that there's already something in that particular widget and you want to grab its value. Set means either there is nothing in that widget and you want to set its value, or there's something already in the widget and you want to reset its value. Does that make sense? It's the typical kind of getter and setter we've been working with in Java. All right? So they show examples here. They show you, examples of both the get text and the set text. Almost always, when you use the get text, it'll be used like this. In other words, you'll be putting it on the right-hand side of an equal sign and using it to set something on the left-hand side of an equal sign. And almost always, when you set it, it'll be more like this. All right? Then they come in and they explain everything that's in here. Now, the only thing that I changed, just so you know, and that you're not going to see it yet, I don't think I made any typing errors. I could have. But the only thing that I changed in here, to me, if you look up on the screen here, this was redundant. I had you say tip% plus equals 0.01f and tip% minus equals. That's the only thing that I think we changed. And I don't know why that plus sign, that when you click those buttons, that should be happening instantaneously. And at least on mine, it's not. I don't know why. I'll try to look at it and see if I can figure out why. But as of right now, I'm not sure what the problem is. Maybe we didn't do this. Did we set the listeners? I don't know. Let me look. No? That's what I thought. I thought we'd get an error if that wasn't done. Which makes sense. That's actually where they should be done. Yeah. So they go through the whole process here. Now this is what I want you to see. Even if you're still typing, if you take a look, because what they explain here, this is toward, I believe, the end of the chapter. It's called the life cycle of an activity. I'm going to give you my take on it. I'm not going to read what they say. But this is this picture here that's on page 123 in the handout. All right? Where did we put code? We put code in on paused, we put code in on resume, and we put code in on create. So you don't have to put code in all of these particular areas. You can put code in some of them, you know, or in all of them, or in, well, if you put it in none of them, probably nothing would happen. All right? But they mention here, they say resumed. Remember we put that code in on resume? It says this state is also known as the active state or the running state. All right? A running activity is visible and has the focus. So when it's resumed, that's like, again, it's like you were using your tip calculator, your phone rang, now you hung up the phone. That's when the resume would be called. Paused is just the opposite. A paused has lost the focus. So again, you're running the tip calculator on your phone rings. All right? Now stopped is different. We didn't put any code in stopped, but look at this. The activity has lost focus and is completely hidden by another activity. One thing you all in here, all right, please listen up. You don't have to look, but please listen to this. You all have to realize, you're all smart people. You do realize this, that although this is really powerful, this phone is really powerful, there are certain things that it's much easier to do with this laptop than it is to do with this phone. All right? The phone, unless I have it plugged in, it's constantly draining battery. All right? Typically, I don't have as big a processor in the phone as I do in the computer. All right? It's much easier in the regular computer to have threads, to start and stop different things, where there's only a certain number of things I'm able to start and stop in a mobile device. And that's what they're talking about. What can happen in here, and they go into it, but I don't remember where it is in the book, that on this stop thing and this destroyed thing, sometimes what happens is the system takes over. So if Amin is sat there and he got a phone call, okay, he was doing his tip calculator, but then he figured it out by hand. And he went and he got a phone call, then he got done, he's playing a game, and then he got done, he got another phone call, etc. And now his tip calculator hasn't been running for 3 hours. All right, just been paused. The operating system could determine it's not running anymore, let's just destroy it. Because he wants to do something else, but he can't because he's got too many things open. And they're taking up too many resources. So the system can, at least on its own, can destroy activities. All right, just so you're aware of that. This save and restore, this is the thing we did with the preferences. All right. And again, the idea is, as I mentioned, that even if you just turn from portrait to landscape or vice versa, the system technically, this has to redraw itself. So it's got to save the values that it had. That's what it's doing in that shared preferences object. All right? So that's explained in here. The last thing they talk about in here, and again, this is my opinion for whatever it is or isn't worth, but if you'd all take a second to look on the screen here, I already mentioned to you that kind of the magic place here is developer.android.com. All right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to developer.android.com/reference. As you may guess, please take a look on the screen. That has in there virtually every class that exists for Android applications. That's the ultimate resource. So if you're working and you want to know, you're having a problem with using arrays with Android, if not the first, one of the first things that you're going to get, so I'm going to try that. I'm going to go using arrays in Android. And I'm looking. All right, there it is. Developer.android reference Java util arrays. All right. Like I said, that's typically going to be the best reference you have because it'll be up to date and it'll have a listing of everything that exists in there. Sometimes it will give you code examples, other times it will not. All right. So there was this is all the code. If you want, you can compare what I gave you with what's on page 129 in the book. I guess it's part of 3. 129, 131, and 133. But an explanation of all that code is given on the page before that. I tried to give you my explanation. I don't think it's right for me to sit and read out of a book or a PDF to you. All right, so I'm giving you my take on it. You may or may not agree that the way I put things, well, it's a lot better in the book. Then you should go and listen to read what's in the book. All right. So, not to pick on anybody, but let's assume Colin says, you know, I'm following you in the class, I'm listening, etc., but I'm just really struggling with this. All right. If you look on the screen here, now this is page 135 of the PDF, but it is page 117 in the book. All right, but they have an example here, and they ask you to create this. This is real similar to what we just did. All right, notice there's no button on it or anything else, but it's just this times this, which gives you this minus this, which gives you this. All right, so if you are confused, I would suggest trying that. All right, I'm not going to give you that for an assignment. I guarantee I'm not going to put that on a test. But I'm just saying, if you're going through the stuff and you're like, I'm just really struggling, that's a good place to start. All right? They've got an exercise here that walks you through the documentation for the Android API. All right. I want to go through this. It's pretty short. It's about 20 pages long, which means it's 10 pages, you know, both sides. But they talk about Logcat in there, which I want to show you. All right? This is about debugging. We have talked about debugging, you know, with virtually every programming language that we've worked with. All right? You know there's 3 types of errors. Okay? You know that there are logic errors, which are the hardest to find. All right? You know there are runtime errors that you don't find until you're running the program. And you know there are syntax errors. The compiler will find the syntax errors for you. At runtime, the compiler will find the runtime errors for you. You must find the logic errors. All right? That's nothing new. We've talked about this before. And the author mentions too, if you look up on the screen here, talks about, in his humble opinion or their humble opinion, there are 4 phases to testing. When you do the first phase, you're trying to check and make sure that the app works and the interface is correct. So look at this. Check the interface. Check it in portrait mode. Check it in landscape mode. All right? Check it on all target screen sizes. So add some extra emulators. All right? Check it on all target platforms. One big thing is, and you're going to see this, I still want to bring very soon I want to bring them back in. But what you're going to see is we're going to have to learn how to hook these things up and basically take the tablets that we have using the USB and plug them into your computers and use those. All right. Now, when we do that, if you know, please listen to this. First of all, 2 things. First of all, we've got 9 of them. There's 9 of you. Second of all, 1 doesn't work. So one of you is going to use mine, which means I don't have one. That's fine. If I ever plug mine in, I can show you it up here. I can't tape. In other words, it breaks the connection with Camtasia. All right? And I've even investigated it, and it's like, don't do it. That's Camtasia's recommendation. All right? So I'm not going to have one. So what I'm saying is I'm going to be running this stuff continuously using the emulator. after the end of this week, probably a week, not a week from, remember there's no class a week from today, it's President's Day. You're off next Monday. But a week from tomorrow, we'll probably end up bringing those in. All right? And I'm just going to bring that big box in every day. And what I'm going to say is, we'll just put a number on each box or something. Mean gets number 1, Evan gets number 2, etc. Whoever loses gets my machine. All right? I will tell you my machine is no better, no worse than the ones they have. Okay? So after you've gone through and tested the interface, then you want to test the app with valid data. What you should always do when you run an app is you should have a test plan. Did everybody hear that? You should have a test plan. And first, you should have a bunch of valid cases. Now, when I'm running this thing right here, isn't it really easy for me to go in and put in values like $100 or $10? Because I can figure out exactly what the tip should be. It's real easy to do that. All right? But after you do that, in your test plan, you should put in some weird values too, just to make sure they're handled okay. But then you should see if you can break it. It's considered a victory if you are able to break your own app. Better you than somebody else. After you've done all that, then you hook it up to a real machine and you run the same tests on there to make sure it looks okay on that machine. All right? So as they say, the goal of testing is to find all bugs. The goal of debugging is to fix all the bugs that you found during the testing phase. All right. They talk about how to check the layout. Now, if you look up here, there are a few different things that you can do. Again, if you look up on the screen here, we have not gone through these. I'm by no means an expert in this, but when you look up here, there's a bunch of different stuff that you can do up here. All right? And with many of these things, if you put your mouse over it, notice orientation in editor. Now I'm in landscape. All right? I've never even run the thing in landscape to see how it works, what it looks like, etc. But you can bet, if I'm going to go and give you 5 weeks or whatever it is to work on a project, that unless you say it's portrait only or it's landscape only, I'm going to try it in both. And it should look professional in both. Now, I don't want you to turn around and say, you know what, then screw you. I'll just make it portrait and it won't even work in landscape. That's fine if that's really the way that the app should be. But let's face it, most apps that you use, other than games which might be set up to landscape only, most are both. And it really should be both. All right? So, unless you have an overriding reason to make it portrait only or landscape only, I'm going to assume you're not going to do that. You can zoom in and zoom out. I've done a little of that already by clicking the buttons that are over here. And there's other things that you can do too. I don't want to go over all these because this view that's here has changed a little bit over time. All right? 3 types of errors I already mentioned. How to handle runtime errors. This is the worst thing that happens. Believe it or not, that's what it does. Unfortunately, tip calculator has stopped. Okay? Means you're hosed. Right? Remember before where we checked to see if it was empty and we set that equal to 0 if it was empty? Try taking that code and try taking that code that's in there, comment that code out, that whole if statement, all right, or whatever it was in there, and run it again and leave it empty. That's how you learn, by making mistakes like that. All right? Now, if you look up on the screen here, this area, and it's the same area, if you look on your screen here, please, let's see, where is it? Come on. Where are you? Let's see. I don't think I have to do it from here. But when you run the program, all right, I don't know why that's not opening up. It should. But what can happen is you can get an error. if you get an error, if you look up on the screen here, the bottom part of your screen, someplace in there, it'll go red. It's trying to do one of those stack traces for you and show you where the problem was. All right? Sometimes you look at it and you're like, hey, Jeff, I can't figure it out because my whole frickin' screen is red. Everything's red. And that'll happen if you've got enough errors. All right? So as it says, when an app encounters an error that causes it to end, the emulator or device displays an error message telling basically what happened. This area that's in here, when you're in this is called Logcat view, right there. But you can write your own stuff in Logcat. Now, you may remember this, you may not. But one thing I mentioned to you, we did a little bit of GUI stuff with regular Java, correct? Not a lot, but we did a little bit. And one thing I told you was even if we had a GUI, we made a calculator, whatever it was, all right, but even if you've got a simple GUI, that if you want to write stuff to the screen, you can still use system.out.println and write stuff to your screen. That's kind of what you're doing with Logcat. All right? So as it says, the most common way to trace code execution is via the use of Logcat. All right? And when you do that, it says here Eclipse with Logcat displayed. If you look on the screen here, please look right there. See this? Okay, at least a couple people are looking. But if you look right there, if it says verbose, that means show me everything that's happening in the program. But this thing right here allows you to filter. And what you can do if you click the down arrows, you can filter it to show you only statements you put in Logcat. So while it's kind of like setting a breakpoint. So when the program is running, you can print out certain things that are happening in the program to make sure that it's operating the way you want it to operate. Notice when you do this, you even have your choice of what color you want the stuff to print in. So you can call it with D, E, W, or I, and you can see the colors that go along with those. All right? So how do you do that? Well, again, looking on the screen here, you have to import android.util.log. Then declare a constant, because that lets you know what it is you're going to be logging, and then you can start telling it when to log things. If you look on the screen here, see that? Bill amount. It's going to allow you to trace the execution of your program as it's going through, and you're running it. You'll be able to see down on the bottom of your screen what the values are as you're changing things. It's an excellent way to find logic errors. All right? The other thing you can do, and we're going to do this in the next one of the next programs that we do, is why they chose this name, I have no idea. But you can do what are called toasts. Okay? Please look up on the screen here. See where it says right there on create method on the bottom? That's a toast. What a toast is it's something that appears on the bottom of your screen. It fades in, and after about 2 or 3 seconds, it fades out again. All right? We don't have the equivalent in here of like a message box. You know, in C# we use like messagebox.show. We don't have that here. If you want to give the user, you know, a real fast little message or something, you use a toast. All right? And what they mention here, it's another way to trace code execution. Well, normally a toast is used to just provide some kind of an informative message to the user. That's it. All right? The first step, as it says, is you have to import the toast class. All right? It's stored in the Android widget package. So what does that mean? Import android.widget.toast. It's the first thing you have to do. Okay? This is setting up the toast. it's doing it in 2 statements. Here you're doing it in 1 statement. All right? So what's going to happen? See where it says this right here? Okay. This tells you what you should be running the toast on. This is the code that comes up where it says on create method right there. That is this right there. Okay? And you can do it. This is what's funny. Length short, that's a short length of time. Length long, that's a long length of time. No, it's not. They're both very short. The short is literally for about a second or 2, and the long is closer to maybe about 4 or 5 seconds. All right, there may be a way that you can go in there and jack with it, so if you wanted something to come up for 10 seconds, you might be able to do it. I've never tried to find that out. All right, but again, the idea is that what toasts do is they allow you to put up on screen on your app a very short, descriptive little information message more than anything else. That's what they're for. All right. All right. There's also a debugger. We're almost done. So it says when you use Logcat, you have to add statements to your code. Then when you're done debugging, you need to remove those, but you can use the debugger. The debugger is built into the app. It says it's built into the software. The first step in debugging an app is to find out the cause of the bug. So what can you do? Guess what? You can go into your code. Let's go into our code here. And I don't remember exactly right now how you do it, but you can go in and you can set breakpoints. All right. We've done this in other languages before. Yeah.
With the calculating display after the switch.
Is that what my error was?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Go to your ticket amount equals series of floats up equals.
Here? Tip amount. Here? So you're saying right here? Like that. All right, everybody hear that? Ethan was saying that I think that's the reason the plus sign wasn't working, right? The plus and the minus. At the bottom of your on click right here, we've got this switch statement. After the switch statement, tell it to do a calculate and display again. That's why for the plus sign and the minus sign, that's why they weren't updating. That makes sense. I should check in my original code and see if I had it in there, just for the hell of it. Nope. I think that, yep, that's the original one. So it wasn't. I thought it was working on the original one. All right. Thank you. Everybody get that? Go back to your code. At the very bottom, we wrote this on-click method. At the very bottom of the on-click method, right before the ending curly brace, all right, add a call to calculate and display. Thank you. All right. What's that? Yeah. That makes, I mean, it makes sense. All right. All right. So they talk in here about how you can work with breakpoints, how you can step through code, how you can inspect variables, etc. You can even filter the stuff. I mentioned that to you before. And finally, they end with talking about setting up emulators. I'm not going to go into any more. I'm not an emulator expert. I'm not an expert at anything, but especially emulators. They mentioned that if you're using, an emulator for an old phone, please look up on the screen. All right. You might have extra, they're saying you may have extra keys up here. All right. I'm not going to worry about that either. How to add an emulator for a tablet. We've already got a couple emulators on there, so we should be fine. Now, I don't want to go on. I don't want to go into section 2. We'll do that next week. All right. We've got about 45 minutes to an hour left today. That's for you to try to get this working. All right. So by Thursday, by the end of class period, you should have this done and turned into me, and you should have the fortune teller program done and turned into me. Any questions on that? Because the handout that I gave you, with the homework on it, it didn't say that I wanted you to do this one too. I want you to have this one done. Tomorrow will be lab all period. During that time, I'm going to be rewriting my BMI program. All right, and I want to see if I can add images and a few other things, maybe a launch image, so some other stuff that we haven't talked about yet, so we can start getting into that stuff. Then next week, if you look up on the screen, I'd like to go through as much of these chapters as possible. In Chapter 5, we learn more about user input and output. In Chapter 6, we learn more about error handling. In Chapter 7, that's probably the key one. We talk about controlling the appearance of the app. So we talk about a lot of that stuff that's in there in more depth and breadth of coverage. In Chapter 8, I think you asked about this the other day, Ethan. Maybe you weren't the one. But in Chapter 8, we'll talk about menus. All right? Then in Chapter 9, we'll talk about fragments. It starts getting pretty difficult when you start to get into fragments, just so you know. All right? And last thing, the next thing we're going to do is chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. But I think I mentioned this to you before, but I am going to say it again anyway. After that, section 3 of the book, this newsreader app, I'm not going to cover. I'm not going to cover chapters 10, 11, and 12. But we will come back to the book then and do chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 and try to get the task list app done. All right? And get that task list app done and get it done using Java. All right? Then we'll spend one period on how to deploy an app, etc. But then we'll start on the Kotlin stuff. Then we'll rewrite that task list app in Kotlin. That's how we're going to start with the Kotlin stuff. All right, does that make sense? All right, so that's what you have to look forward to. Okay, we're not going to get done. We're not going to be done with the Android stuff probably before the break. Maybe we will. I hope we are. But I'm planning on spending 2, maximum 3, but probably 2 weeks on the Kotlin stuff. In an ideal world, somewhere around April 1st, you'll be working on your projects. I'm going to have a 4-part thing. You're going to have to submit every part to me. And I'm going to ask that you give me a write-up of what you're doing, and it's going to have to be very detailed. And again, I said this to you before, and I know some of you don't like this. I'm sorry. But it's the way that, sometimes things just are the way they are. The last day we're supposed to have class, I believe, is the 10th. I could be wrong, but I think it's the 10th. All right, fine, 9th. But whatever the last day is, the day before that, all right, so if it's the 9th, it'll be the 8th. I plan on inviting Evan over here from St. Louis, Paul over here from St. Louis, the lady, Miss DeVries, who was here, and anybody else I can get. Patrick from the other building, Jeremy from the other building, JC, etc. I'd like to get about 20 people in here, and each one of you is going to be on stage for a maximum of 15 minutes, a minimum of maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And I want you to go over your app. Also, I'm trying to get a few people in from business and industry. My hope is that you bring up your portfolio and you try to sell yourself. These are potential employers. All right? In honor of Ethan, I might even ask Ms. Zika to come. All right? He's like, do I have to come that day? All right. Any questions on anything that we've done today?
I don't think she would,
I don't think she's real pleased with me right now. All right.
this is not.
Yeah. Okay. So tomorrow will be lab for the entire period, and on Wednesday we will start, and ideally if we can do it in one period, great, but I'm going to do it really, really slow. All right? We're going to take and we're going to say, hey, we want to build an app. Let's plan out what we want it to look like. It's kind of the way that I want you to start planning out the app that you're going to be doing. All right? We'll do that Wednesday, probably Wednesday and Thursday. Again, Friday, I'll only be here for the first hour or so. All right. Some of you are at 3 absences, just so you know. So if you miss Friday, if you're like, oh, hell, he's not going to be here, I'm not going to be here. So if you're once you get to 4 absences, I have to give you that piece of paper, and you have to sign it, and I have to sign it. Then if you miss again, you get the same piece of paper, but you have to sign it. You have to talk to Mr. Corrigan. And if you do it again, that's the 6th time, then you have to go over and talk to Jeremy and have him sign it. And if you do it again, they try to kick you out of the class. All right? And to fight that, you've got to go and fight against the ADRB, which is the Academic Disciplinary Review Board. And you can typically do it from here, but you have to Skype in, and you have to explain to them why you missed 7 times. All right? And I'm just telling you that because, you know, I don't want to see anybody miss. I realize people are going to miss for whatever reason. All right, at least on occasion. I proved that last week. All right? All right, so if there's no more questions, that's it for this period. Didn't say that's it for this period. You can leave now. I didn't say that. That's it for the lecture portion of this period. Yeah, well, that's why I reset it.